Welcome to It's a New Day. My name is James Young. This week we're going to be talking about the need for an African American chamber in the city of Rochester. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And my guest today is?
Sean Rugless. I'm president and CEO of the Greater Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky African American Chamber of Commerce.
Okay, man, that's a mouthful.
It's a long name.
Are you originally from Rochester?
Born and raised.
Okay, give us a little, tell us about where you are from Rochester.
Well, born and raised in Rochester, New York. Son of Rudine Armstrong and Roy Rugless. Graduated from Edison Tech. And I'm not going to say the year because then I would date myself. But I've always been in Western New York. I left Rochester, did my undergrad started at MCC, moved to do my four-year degree at University of Buffalo, and moved back to Rochester to finish my MBA at the William Simon School of Business.
Okay.
And at that point, I was recruited from Procter & Gamble and left Rochester to go to Cincinnati.
So that's how you got into Ohio?
Yeah.
Now, tell us about this laborious job of starting a black chamber of commerce, not just a chamber of commerce, but a black chamber of commerce. And the reason why I stress black chamber of commerce is because, as we were talking off camera, the unemployment rate of African Americans, as well compared to the amount of businesses compared to other segments of this community, we are still lagging very much behind.
Yeah.
And so maybe black-owned businesses may not understand the need for a chamber of commerce. Would you really tell us how you started the chamber of commerce, if there was any adversity that you were met with, and how did you evolve to get to where you got to?
Okay, I'm gonna break that up into a couple of quick questions.
Please.
I did not start our chamber. I actually became the fourth president of our chamber. Our chamber was actually started I think back in 1996 by a group of black business owners who wanted to have a voice in what was going on in their city. And so the demographics for Cincinnati is, right now we're about 47% African American, about 2% Hispanic, and within that, when you have that much scale, it's very important to have these points of views and insights at the table when things are being decided. I couldn't underscore how important it is these days to have minorities chambers of commerce, black, Hispanic, or whatever. And the reason is because in 2008, there's this new census term called minority majority cities. And basically what they're saying is that in 2008, there were 8 cities around the U.S. in which the minority population tipped over 51%. And those cities were like Atlanta, Chicago, I think there was Miami, L.A., in 2012, right now we're looking at about 15 cities whose ethnic populations are more than 51%. And for the first time 2 years ago, I think the birth rate of newborns topped. There were more African American and Hispanics than whites born. And so what we're talking about here is the fact that it's highly important and a critical imperative that cities like Rochester and anyone else start to embrace diversity at all levels. And so the reason that it's important for minority chambers to exist or African American chambers to exist is because you can't build an economic climate without a voice that includes all segments of the population. And so our chamber was started by a group of individuals who saw a lot of money coming to cities. They saw a lot of urban development happening. They saw a lot of their urban communities start to change. And collectively they said, you know, if we try to attack this independently, then no one hears us. But if we collectively got together and we're 100 businesses strong, then people have to pay attention to us and we can advocate for policies that make a change.
I would like for you to say that again. What happens if we try to do this singularly? What happens?
No one hears you.
Okay.
Because you may only represent one point of view. Think about what happens in city council sometimes when there's a hot issue and hundreds of people come down to convene. That's when the mayor, that's when the city council members, that's when everyone takes it serious. So the issue becomes, if we can all agree on a particular set of issues that we can all get behind, then collectively we have a stronger voice and we can make things happen. But if we were to continue to attack those issues independently, then what we'll find is that we're one voice out of 1,000 that can easily be drowned out. But it's very difficult to drown out hundreds of voices all on the same page.
And how many members does the chamber have now, or paid members?
Yeah, paid members. We have approximately 300 paid members. And we deal with about 1,500 to 2,000 businesses annually. We're one of the largest ethnic chambers in the state of Ohio.
Okay.
So we started talking about political elections this year and making sure that we have a ground game to galvanize voting. We're positioned to do those type of things.
I want to come back to the networking benefits of a chamber later. But I want to also talk about right now some of the benefits, because I ran a business newspaper for 15 years.
Okay.
And one of the biggest problems that small businesses, and in particularly minority or African American owned businesses face, is that they think that problems that happen to them is uniquely just to them.
Right.
But when they come together in a collective, they will see that what they thought was a unique problem is basically a problem that everyone is faced with. And it allows that business owner to see or to talk and engage with other business owners to figure out how they can get around that. Do you have seminars, workshops to help businesses grow?
Yeah, I mean, the things the top things that we found that plague all minority businesses or small businesses is access to capital, access to new opportunities. They need marketing support in terms of getting their businesses out, and they need a pathway in terms of somebody introducing or advocating on behalf of their business. And so what we've done in terms of our chambers, we do offer chamber programming in which we have networking events that happen between 8 to 10 times a year. We convene between 400 to 800 businesses annually, and that's usually a mixture of small businesses, corporations, public partners like our city government, all convening together to uncover new opportunities and make relationships. We have workshops and seminars. We do about 15 to 20 per year on various topics on how to market your business, how to get certified as a minority-owned business, access to capital series, those type of things. And then our chamber is fortunate enough to have a media relationship with Radio 1 networks. And so we purchase media in black newspapers, on black radio, and do a huge amount of PR on behalf of our businesses, such that we do whatever we can to give our businesses the promotional opportunities to be able to introduce their business to their region or to the world. And then lastly, I couldn't underscore how important it really is to make sure that we make it easy for the world to do business with us. That's the primary purpose for a chamber. The primary purpose for a chamber is to be that level of connectivity. So all the things we just talked about, if one individual business person tried to do all of that, they wouldn't be working on their business. What chambers do have the power to convene people, again, for opportunity, but they also then establish relationships and networks with banks, with the city of Rochester, with Kodak or anyone else that does private sales and procurement looking for minority businesses to do business with, and introduces that vibrant business community to those opportunities. So that's one of the primary roles.
Do you have good connections with the corporate community there?
Oh, absolutely. On our board, we have about 4 corporations.
Okay.
On our roster, we have 20. We also have a direct working relationship with the mayor of Cincinnati and the governor of Ohio. And so we're seen as an economic development partner. So if there's a new project that comes to the city, like Cincinnati just recently built casinos. And so it's a $400 million project. They promised to have minority and women-owned business participation and inclusion. That means, that equates to about, for the construction, there's about $150 million. That's about, between $50 to $60 million of opportunity that can go towards a minority business. And so by being a Chamber of Commerce, we became that connectivity, that person in the middle that saw where the contract opportunities were and connected it with our business community. And thanks to that, what we've gotten is a 37% participation rate. We generated about $45 million in incremental new spending that went to minority-owned businesses as a result of that, and minority and women-owned businesses as a result of that. So, now my corporate client is Caesars Entertainment. Same thing with Toyota, same thing with Kroger, same thing with Procter & Gamble. For Rochester, it's imperative. I mean, you have a lot of great corporations here that spend a huge amount of money from suppliers both locally and across the country. And so, what we can do is look at, what Kodak is spending. We can look at what Paychex is spending. I mean, they buy paper clips and they buy pens, they buy professional services, they need attorneys, they need accountants. And so if a chamber can, the key part to a chamber is to make sure that they foster a very strong climate with the corporate community, the private sector community. And if they can add value to what they do in terms of introducing viable businesses to their supply chain, and enable that corporation then to make a contribution back to the city that they live and work in, then I think it's a win-win for everybody.
Absolutely. I also believe that a chamber is supposed to be, or I'd like to think, the conduit between the corporate community and the small business community. to be that conduit, for instance, like you're talking about supplier diversity.
Right.
I believe that that chamber needs to be able to have enough information to be able to go to the corporate community to express why they need to be good corporate neighbors and good corporate citizens in doing business with this community. And at the same time, I believe that the chamber can now get small businesses, African-American owned businesses, to see why they need to step up to the plate. So they can get these opportunities.
Right.
How is the supplier diversity in Ohio?
Supply diversity in Ohio is just like every other city, every other state. You have some activity, you have some players who are real strong, you got some players who are just starting. At the end of the day, we can all be better. And so one statistic that we have, and probably will be similar to Rochester, is that, despite Cincinnati's, racial makeup of 47% African American, collectively these businesses contribute to less than 1% of GDP. So we have, for all the money, goods, products, and services that are made in our particular city, minority business accounts for less than 1%. So what that means is that we have an opportunity to get our companies bigger and to scale them up. And it wouldn't be any different. That's a national trend, so it's not just Cincinnati, it's probably the same thing for here in terms of Rochester.
Are you facing any problems that, once again, I dealt with this in Florida, majority companies, majority communities had 99.9% of the business.
Right.
And they're fighting tooth and nail for that last percentage as well, to be able to go into lawsuits challenging the different documentations that we were able to document to justify having minority businesses and having set-asides and goals and those types of things.
Right.
Are you experiencing that, or have you experienced that in Ohio?
Yeah, that's the main, that's one of the main tenets of having a chamber, is to have a business association that can get involved, negotiate the terms to make it a favorable climate for minority businesses to participate without interference, right? And so what we do have is a situation in, we're a capitalistic society called America. The goal here is to make money, and no one steps up to make less money. Right? So if you're the majority firm that's enjoyed a 99% share of the market, there's nothing I can say to convince you to give up 5%, right? So what ultimately happens is that chambers of commerce and other minority business associations work with our private sector, our corporate leadership, and we say, well, look, your consumer base is becoming more diverse. The cities you work in and live in are becoming more diverse, but you've not yet made a commitment to spend diversely, right? And so what we're starting to see is a trend. What we're starting to see is that as corporations and even cities and states, they have what are called minority business requirements. And we're starting to see that corporations now are requiring that the vendors and suppliers that work with them also then help them meet the goal. And so they may release a contract now that may be $2 million, right? And they may say, well, look, we would like 10% of that contract, which is $200,000, to go to minority and women-owned businesses. And so now, as a source of doing business with me, you now, if you're a majority company, have to now come up with a plan, right, to identify businesses in order to get that contract, because it's a $2 million deal. Does that make sense? So the key part is that I now need to be introduced to the minority business community because it's a business imperative. If I don't know who the minority business community is, then now I start to lose work, I start to lose contracts, I start to lose relationships. And those relationships, so it's more important, it's critically important that city leadership, that private sector leadership embrace inclusion, mandate inclusion. And if they don't, we have cities like Detroit who are primary examples of when it doesn't work. Exactly. You think about Detroit's racial makeup when it was the 5th largest city in America just less than a decade ago. It is now devastated because the business core, the urban core, has been conceded. There was a high density of minority-owned businesses. Nobody was doing business with them. And when the automobile industry left, those businesses fell apart. And so no city wants to be a Detroit right now because unemployment's high, crime is high, urban blight is high. The way to reverse that is to make a commitment that says, well, look, we're going to work with all sectors of the community so we can have a vibrant economic community that, or the corporations and other companies want to move to our city to participate. So that's why it's always important that leadership from the top make a commitment around this idea of inclusion. But you need chambers and you need other professionals at the table to ensure those things are happening and there's some compliance against what's been stated.
I don't know what the education level is in Ohio, the graduation rate, but I would also assume that because you have a chamber of this magnitude, this could be a strong magnet to influence young African American students to stay in school, and perhaps maybe your education, your graduation rate there maybe be a little bit stronger just for having this one particular entity in your community, because if nothing else, you have something there that you can point to.
Right.
See, here we have nothing that we can really point to. And then the people, the black people that are successful, they're so far removed that you're pointing in space, okay? And it would give the impression that there aren't any successful black-owned businesses here. But I believe that if we had a chamber or either some kind of organization that represented that where we could show not only to the corporate community, but to this community that we are doing something.
Yeah, I think Rochester has a very diverse and vibrant minority business segment. The issue is that it's not connected, and it's not. They're not working in unison to unlock even more opportunities for each other. So let me give you an example. Rochester's downtown has been developed, right? I see now mixed-use property downtown. I see the destruction of Midtown Plaza and something that's coming out of the earth to be created. I'm seeing neighborhood, I'm seeing weatherization programs, I'm seeing all these other pieces. So randomly, I'm seeing a lot of businesses, minority and Hispanic and everything else, participating in that. But the issue is that we probably are participating at a level of this magnitude, whereas collectively, if we were to start to looking at where all the spend is happening, we could probably, each one of our businesses might be able to increase their sales by 30, 40, 50%. And so I think you got a point. But I do think that Rochester does have a vibrant minority business community. I think there's been some disconnectedness. I'm not seeing a lot of episodes where people are working together against a particular project or a goal. And I think that would be the next generation of what needs to happen. But in short, I would say that, in addition to getting a chamber or some sort of organization established, I think that first we all have to agree on what we're in it for. I mean, as business owners, whether we're, as particularly your most successful ones down to the smaller businesses, need to have a common goal and need to make a commitment that says this is what we're after.
I found that to be one of the hardest problems when I was in Florida.
Right.
We had top-level black-owned businesses that were doing millions of dollars.
Right.
But now trying to get them to start doing business with a company that is doing thousands of dollars, it was so hard. And one of the things that they said was that they felt that it wasn't their responsibility, that it was the government's responsibility. So how do we change that mindset to get people that are really top-heavy to start, filtering down, because this is how we make a community strong.
Right. I think we first have to understand the insight behind a couple of things. The first is that our most successful businesses, in terms of African-American-owned businesses, are successful for a reason. They have a core competency to offer, they got their processes together, and they've been successful in landing business relationships that can help their business grow. Typically, these businesses are first generation, all right? And so they get to a certain stature, and then they're asked to work with individuals that may not have a huge amount of capability yet. All right, I say yet. And so it becomes more risky to then work with businesses that are unknown. And so I think what needs to happen is we got to make our biggest and best bigger with a commitment that they would then work with our up-and-coming growth-oriented businesses such that everybody has opportunity. So here's what I mean by that. We have some businesses who are positioned well, right? They know what they do, they have a business plan, they have a business model, and it's worked. Then we have some businesses within our community that don't have a plan yet. And so that's where I think chambers and other organizations could be helpful in terms of really working with these businesses, particularly the high potential ones that have a lot of growth associated with them in industries where people are spending in, to work with them and get them positioned for success so they can grow, right? But I don't think it's government's job. I would agree with that. I think that there's been other business segments in other communities that have worked collaboratively to provide themselves the skill set needed to move forward. And I'll give you one example. You know, the Jewish community, or you look at any other immigrant community. They have a history of coming to America, setting up a business and setting up a house. And what you'll see in the house and the business is generations of people working, you know, in one business in one house. What that ends up doing is it creates exposure for that younger generation. Such now they are actually breeding new entrepreneurs that at the time that they turn 18 to time that they're 21, that business can be turned over to them, or they can start another enterprise. And so we see a lot of that happening in our black communities. You know, we see that a lot of our retail stores are not black owned. We see a lot of our retail places, and we see a lot of our children not wanting to do what the parents started out the business to do. And so I really believe that if we really do become that, you know, that culture, if we can live the cultural value we talked about in my brother's keeper, the answer should be yes. And we have to then figure out a way that we can work collaboratively, in which we can bring our own skills. So as an example, one opportunity for a more successful African-American business is to do internships and offer job opportunities to some of these up-and-coming high school students or college students. Get some internships going, get some work at a market rate below, you know, market value. That person just now has a huge amount of exposure they can transfer into their own business. We're not doing a lot of that, and I think we should. Government could play a role, though. I'm not saying that we should be relying on government, but government should be producing dollars to help with small business growth and development, because our chamber is funded by government dollars. That's how we're able to do all the workshops I just talked to you about. But we know that we're held accountable to producing some outcomes. And so our programs, as an example, last year generated about $11 million worth of new contracts for the businesses that we work with. We worked with about 30 to 60. We created access to over $1 million of capital for these businesses, new capital. We created or retained close to 300 jobs in Cincinnati alone. And so what we want to do is make sure that government programs, if we do have them, they're targeted towards some effective platforms that end up creating a more vibrant business community. But just having government programs with no accountability is just a waste of money.
Do you help with access to capital? Do you do loan docs, or have they given you the opportunity to do loan docs, or do you work with other institutions to do those kinds of loans, or how is access to capital?
Well, I think what we're starting to see is we've experienced a slowdown in lending for traditional lenders, right? And so what our chamber's been effective in doing is actually creating a roundtable of lenders, commercial lenders, about 2 years ago. And we also then called in our congressional leadership, the folks who are on the banking committees in D.C. And we learned something. What we learned is that commercial lending is not expected to change for a number of years. So access to capital will continue to be one of the biggest barriers to small business. The standards for getting a loan have been elevated, right? So whereas you could have received a loan 2 years ago under certain criteria, that criteria is no longer valid. It's gone up. And I think that's going to be the reality for a really long time. Our chamber is focused on doing a couple of things. First is we need to identify new capital streams. The SBA has a micro-lending program for business loans from $5,000 to $20,000. I mean, these very small loans that can be a nice capital infusion. We need to identify where those are and get our business community connected to that. We're also convening what are called banking roundtables, in which we're setting up formal relationships with business bankers. So we have a one-on-one relationship with them, and our job is to refer as many viable businesses to do business with that bank. And what we want to do is track the success. Sometimes it's easier to hide from what's going on when nobody's tracking anything. But if I refer 20 businesses to you and only one got a loan, I can say that your bank has an issue, right? Exactly. And as a member of our chamber, what we want to do is help your bank be more successful in lending to our community. So those are some of the things we're doing. And then lastly, there are some government-backed loans that have guarantees that guarantee the loan up to 90%, which should make it easier for banks to lend to small business. But the feedback that I got was that a lot of banks look at that as administrative work. They use it for their best clients to keep them in business, but not necessarily everybody else. So, you know, we got those caveats there. But access to capital will continue to be one of those things. What we did in Cincinnati, lastly, was to we bridged the gap between the minority business and our investment community, our equity investors. And we created, you saw the TV show Shark Tank?
Yes.
Yeah, we did our version of that in Cincinnati called the Shark Pool. Okay. And we brought Damon Johns, the co-founder of FUBU, to Cincinnati. He gave a speech on equity investment in terms of how to attract those relationships. And then we also then had 5 businesses pitch to local investors. And that was the first time that ever been done, you know. And we put 5 businesses on track to receive over $1.2 million. Now, not all of them will be successful because there's a vetting process, but at least a lot of them have identified potential people they can work with.
Once again, this is the value that is added to having a chamber in a community. And for people that are not in business, that are employed or professionals, they may not understand value added, the term value added, the way business owners do.
Right.
So would you help me explain a little bit more? I mean, you've done a great job. I mean, all the different things that you suggested that your chamber is doing, these are all value added things that will help a business grow. And if we can help a business grow, we can help a community grow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, can you once again just truly emphasize the value that a chamber brings not only to a business community, but to a community at large?
Right. I think we've had to change our value proposition over the last couple of years. You know, when the recession hit, there's less dollars. And the feedback we got from our members is, why should I spend my money with you? Why should I be a member of the African American Chamber? And my answer is simply that you can't afford not to be. My challenge to you is to return your investment 5 to 6 times by being a member of our chamber. The first thing that we do in terms of generating value is that we have relationships with other business associations that have dues. And so what we do is we've negotiated a due structure in which members of our chamber get a discounted rate. So as an example, I think Rochester has a Chamber of Commerce that's downtown. And so what you would do as an African American chamber is you would start one and then you would say, hey, look, for every minority business that comes to our chamber, we're going to negotiate a rate lower so that you can save chamber members dollars immediately, and they can belong to both. They can get access to everything that's available in Rochester. So for us, we have a relationship with the Cincinnati USA Regional Chamber. If they walked in the door that day and tried to join, it would be $450. If they came through our chamber, that drops down to $99. So immediately they save $350. The second way you can do that is also chambers. We have access to healthcare plans, workers' comp, those type of things. And so one thing that's very clear is that a business owner is highly susceptible to whether or not they're healthy and whether or not they can save for retirement, these type of things. And so because of the fact that we belong to an association of other chambers, we can negotiate preferred rates that can save a member a huge amount of money. We do employee training. And so if you want a qualified workforce, you don't have to, pay out of pocket for a lot of that stuff. We can factor that. And then lastly, I think if we can help you with your loan packaging, we can provide you with access to new project ideas and things that are coming on. The amount of money you would make by having that advocacy in place will pay our membership fee, which is only $250 a year, for a small business to join. It's $20 a month. Everything I described to you has a rate of return. You probably would save about $1,200 annually. So saving on health care, saving on workers' comp, saving on other membership dues and subscriptions, because our chamber can negotiate better rates, saving on media costs. If you were to advertise and promote, we might have chamber members here that will provide you with your video, provide you with your business cards, provide you with these things because you're part of the association. And so those are real things that hit the bottom line. But then if you're also a member, we want to bring business to you. So there's a lot of different reasons why you should be a member of the chamber.
When I had my newspaper, my tagline was, where there is no vision, the people will perish.
Right.
And That's what I'm asking you now. Take a look at Rochester, and what kind of vision do you see for us so we won't perish?
Well, I think Rochester itself has set a new vision, and I think what needs to happen is that it needs to be embraced by all segments of the community. I think most cities, at least Rochester's age, are reinventing themselves. You know, for Ohio as an example, in Cincinnati, because of the proximity of Procter & Gamble, Kroger, Macy's, we had all these marketing companies. So then we wanted to become a consumer marketing hub. We had all these agencies that moved to town to do business with them. Rochester has state-of-the-art healthcare system. This public school system has been, you know, wavering over. It used to be a model for public education, and so there's a lot of great things in Rochester. So I think Rochester has envisioned what it wants to be in the 21st century. I think what needs to happen is that it needs to be translated so every segment of the community gets on board. I think the broader vision, you know, for minority business needs to be how do we improve the economic climate so that we can have adequate participation? And what that would basically mean would be how are we working with our city council members, particularly when major projects come up and there's money to be spent in the city in terms of goods and services, and there's also the approval of economic development projects. That's a hotbed of opportunity for contractors and local businesses to be involved. The other part is that I believe how can you also then attract businesses and retain businesses to our urban core who need the tax base, who need the jobs, and so we need to be part of that discussion. But I think there's a real good opportunity right now for Rochesterians to reinvent themselves. But again, it goes back to what our discussion was off camera, which was we do need a group of people to agree on what the vision is. But we also need to exhibit strong leadership, because strong leadership means there's times where I'm driving the car and there's times where other people need to be driving and I need to be in the passenger seat. But so long as we're all going in the same direction, we should all be comfortable with that. And you know, what I'll leave you with is this. You know, a lot of people have these businesses and they say, hey, I want to own everything and I want to manage everything, right? And they're able to get their business up to about $1 million, right? And then an opportunity comes where somebody says, hey, I want to invest in your business, I want to buy in your business, but I want 50% stake. But I can grow your business to be, you know, a $10 million business or a $100 million business. And you have to ask yourself, what is better? Is it better to own 100% of $1 million? Or is it better to own 50% of $10 million or $100 million? The answer is the latter. You know, 50%, you know, of a $100 million business is $50 million. You know, so we also have to make sure that as we think about our business community, that we decide on how to do business and do it smart. Most business leaders never operate a business without an escape plan. They don't grow the business to stay in business. They grow the business to eventually then sell that business and get out, right? With what the business proceeds were. So at the end of the day, I think there's a real strong need for vision. I think we need to attach, for the minority business community, we need to attach our vision and our outcomes to what your region has decided to do. We need to work at all levels, both on the private sector, you know, city government, and what have you, to make sure that there's policies and things like that that create a favorable climate for us. And then lastly, I think what we need to do is make sure that our business community is ready. And we need to make sure that we have businesses that are you know, positioned to take on bigger contracts or opportunities. We need to make sure our businesses are modeled so that they can exist in urban communities and be part of the fabric of what makes Rochester great.
One of the things that clouds our vision here in Rochester is because everybody's waiting for another Kodak to come in here and supply another 60,000 jobs. I would like for you to speak about this from working with minority-owned businesses. I mean, you're seeing this from the ground up. To be able to maybe somehow encourage us that we have the ability, maybe not to create 60,000 jobs, but if we could create 6 jobs, that's better than nothing.
Right.
And we do have the ability to do that if we only believed in ourselves, and perhaps maybe these are some other things that a chamber can help us do. Get us to start believing that we don't necessarily have to wait for a Kodak, that we can do this ourselves.
Yeah, Kodak we'll never see anything like Kodak ever again. And I'm not just talking about in the context of Rochester, but I'm talking about in the context that it's projected that 90% of the nation's GDP will be service-oriented, not manufacturing.
Exactly.
Right, and so, you know, when we have big companies here that manufacture like Bosch and Lime or Kodak, what we're seeing is they become specialized in certain industries and sectors, which would be great, so they'll be here for a while, but what they're able to contribute locally will be very different. I think that it's going to be important that we look at where spend is going and what the high growth sectors are and try to get minority businesses involved. We don't have a lot of minority businesses in energy. When the IT wave hit in terms of information technology, we were not successful in getting enough of our community educated on what IT was going to do and create their own companies behind it. So the IT wave kind of passed us. But we have some waves that are coming up now that if we wanted to create 60,000 jobs, we can. Energy is one big one, particularly renewable energy or outfitting these buildings with energy reducing bulbs and things like that. We see growth in healthcare, right? And that's one of the fastest growing sectors. So when you think about what's happening with the U of R and everything else, every hospital system is expanding. And particularly with the Affordable Health Care Act, there are some mandates in there that healthcare systems have to make bigger investments, such as medical records. Everything has to be digitized now. Those are tremendous opportunities to start a new business in those fields. Manufacturing is coming back, but the type of manufacturing that will happen in America will not be the same manufacturing that our fathers had. You know, it's not going to be enough to graduate high school and go work at a factory. What we're going to start to see is that there's a huge amount of information technologies and automation that's happening with manufacturing. So the skill set needed to go into manufacturing now is engineering, architects, industrial design. And so now we got to be focused on those science, math, engineering type of trades in our schools to make sure we're there. So the easiest way is to think about this in America has always been fish where the fish are. I just gave you 3 or 4 sectors right now that are growing and will be adding jobs and will receive investment both from the private sector and from government. And so if we begin to start focusing on how to get businesses, you know, in those sectors, those are going to be our best chance to create our own jobs. I think I shared the statistic with you. There's 1.9 million African American owned businesses in the country, and 1.8 of them have no employees. And which means culturally what we do is we start businesses to take care of our families and get people to school, which is great. But when we start to talk about being part of Kodak or being part of any other company, we're talking employer-based companies. Now we're talking about you and a staff of 5 or 10 to be able to meet that need of what Kodak wants. There's only 100,000 nationally, right? And so when you think about Chicago and Atlanta and Miami and LA, you take all those cities, there's only a handful of businesses that are left that will probably be in the Rochester or Buffalo area that can service these corporations. And so what we have to do is increase the number of businesses that could serve the private sector. But I really do think it's important that we start to get more strategic about what industries and sectors we are going to create businesses in and making sure that you know, we understand how to participate.
I wanted to come back to when you're saying that the IT is gone past us. I mean, there's because the latest thing that people are talking about now, black people creating apps for themselves. I'm looking at that as being somewhat viable. But when you say the IT has passed us, what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is digital and information technology is going to be a very viable sector. But if you remember, 10 years ago, that sector was introduced to everybody.
Yes.
Right? And so I didn't see a lot of individuals jumping into that sector, creating businesses. I did see a lot of businesses that, you know, we all know and love right now, Google, Apple, and some other folks, begin to revolutionize what information technology would then mean. If we knew 10 years ago, like I knew 10 years ago, that word searching like Google or that online purchasing and commerce was going to happen, don't you think then that if our community was in front of that, we would have the opportunity to create our own app stores, our online stores, these type of things. So what ends up happening is other players have come in and have eaten up that market share. So we do have a couple, but when you're in front of the wave, you have an opportunity to create better businesses and bigger businesses. If you come in late in the wave, you get what's left. And so what I'm saying is that yes, it's still a viable segment, but there's a difference in being in front of when that segment is introduced, you know, and being part of that growth, than coming in after everything is set and trying to get what's left. And I think that's where we're going to be with energy. I think that if we aren't smart, with regard to how we can get our construction companies, as an example, to do these green building retrofits, then we're going to be behind again. And all these other construction companies who understand what LEED accreditation is and certifications are and incorporate that into a business offering, then they're going to be in front, we'll be behind. So all I'm saying is that IT wave hit. We saw some populations get in front of the wave and create some great businesses. I don't want another wave to hit and not have our community involved.
Can you also help define for our viewing audience, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being a consumer, but the difference between being a consumer and a producer, because we are a community that consumes, and we're not producing anything. And this is further adding to our impoverished state of being, where if we became producers or understood that we have the capacity to become producers, and if nothing else, we know that we have a market of consumers. So, how do we begin to get this community to understand, instead of just spending money, why not invest your money to make money? Instead of buying $20 worth of lottery tickets, it blows my mind. I stand in line sometimes and I just watch poor people walk into a store spending $20, $50 on these lottery tickets, hoping and praying, wishing that somehow they're going to wake up the next day and there's going to be all this money thrown in their lap, when they could have put that $20 or $50 or even spent it with another black-owned business. That's my first question. And then the next question, I want to talk about how we as black people boycott black-owned businesses. Okay, but first, let's deal with the first part.
Oh boy, those are two loaded questions. Well, the first is on the consumer side. If you look at the totality of African American owned spending in America, I think we outrank most third world countries in the world. All right, so we have a huge amount of buying power, which is exemplified by how many products come from our community or are targeted in our community in terms of urban pop culture, right? So we have a very powerful consumer base that can actually set trends. We spend a good 90% of our dollars outside our own communities for goods and services. So I think we have to first recognize that we have a huge consumer buying power. All right. I will say that when it comes to being a producer, one of the challenges is that we have to make sure we're producing quality. Because I do think that a lot of consumers have a willingness to buy from our own community, but the buying experience and the product quality sometimes is not what we expect. So let me give you an example. In Cincinnati, there are a couple of businesses that I patronize all the time. And as a head of a black chamber, I seek to try to spend as much money and direct as much business towards African American owned businesses. But I don't know why I should have to have a different expectation for what I'm going to get, how long I'm going to wait, in order just to spend that. And the law of economics, whether it's white or black, says, hey, if I have demand, if the supply doesn't meet my expectations, then I'm free to shop and do some other things. So I think I think it's going to be the producers, it's on the producer side, to harness as much of that consumer spend as possible. But we do have some blockades, some things strategically working against us. Let me give you one example. For personal care and hair care products, our community spends more than any other sector in terms of hair care products, call it weaves, shampoos, whatever, right? And a lot of those dollars are Korean. And the reason they're Korean is because they recognize the power of the consumer base, right? They've grown so much with regard to distribution, so they own the distribution, right? So that when a black provider of a product comes in, two things happens. One, they knock their product off, meaning that they make a product just like it, and because they own the distribution in terms of to the urban market, that black producer then is shut down. And so, you know, again, that's an example of a category that has a high amount of consumer spending but low participation. But I think what we need to be doing is to begin to start thinking about making sure that our business community offers a product that is right for the market, not just black people. And I think if it works for us, we got some consumers that are willing to buy for us. But I've never known a company in the world that's existed just on participating with one business segment. So if I'm an automobile manufacturer, dealership, then I not only need to be the dealer of choice for African Americans, but I also need to be the dealer of choice for Italians or other white folks and things of that nature. So we need to build strong propositions, but our community needs to make a commitment. If we're sitting here trying to create jobs for our own community, if we would like to advance a 21st century workforce where our schools are better, if we are trying to build healthier businesses, then what we need to do is make sure that our community as consumers understands that I'm not only buying a product from a black producer, but I'm investing in the stability and sustainability of our community, right? And I think that somebody needs to help tell that story. That says if you have $1 to spend it with us. And we also need to make that promise that says, here's what we're going to do with the spending. We're going to create a job to get that young man off the street. We're going to give him a job in our community so that he can produce something and give a contribution back. We are going to make a commitment that the product quality and experience that you experience with us is going to be parallel to everyone else, so you have no reason to go anywhere else. We're going to invest in our businesses to make it better. And as a result of investing in our businesses and getting bigger and growing sales, we're going to now create a bigger tax base. So the school systems in my neighborhoods get better, and I can educate more children. So there's a ripple effect that needs to happen, but that's the difference between consumers and producers, at least for our segment. We have an extremely high consumer buying position. We have a very low producer base right now. We need to get more businesses involved, and we need to get more businesses, the number of businesses. But what we can't do is ask for forgiveness because our experiences don't match up with everybody else. We should have the same exact experience so we can capture more dollar.
Oh, I tell you, this has been very, very rewarding. I enjoy engaging in these kinds of conversations because, as I said, I did a business newspaper for 15 years. And these were the subject matters that we were trying to get business owners to understand, to get them to see that they have the potential to be and do whatever it is that they want. It's just a matter of belief. And I believe, once again, that's where I'm looking at a business organization such as a Chamber of Commerce.
Right.
I believe that is the staple, that's the glue that can hold us together. That is what can take us from maybe 2 businesses in a community to maybe 5.
Right.
And then those 5 then morph into 10. And I believe through the expertise, I think one of the biggest problems was when business owners tried to go it alone.
Right.
And when we go it alone, as you mentioned earlier, this is just one voice and a voice of so many.
Right.
But now being able to see the benefits and the needs for a Chamber of Commerce and to unite a group of voices together, that changes the whole dynamics of everything. I believe that this service that you're providing, the things that you talked about, these are things that we strongly need here.
Yeah, and I would, we talked before about how do you get so many people to agree.
Yes.
Early in my chamber tenure, it was important for me to try to get as many people to agree on what we were going to offer, our members, because I felt as if, that was going to be the best way to make sure we covered everyone's needs. What I learned within my first 12 months is that's impossible. It is impossible. So what we have to do is borrow from some of the theories that have been proven to have come out of our community. I am a firm believer of the Boyce's is talented 10th theory. I believe that if we can assemble 10% of our great minds and our capabilities and our skill set, and we start to move forward, we will do things for the other 90%, and the other 90% will come. But I think that's what leadership is. Leadership is being in a position to then step out on faith and make things happen. And that's what an entrepreneur is. An entrepreneur is different than a business manager. Business manager are folks who can kind of count money and oversee things and manage the business. Entrepreneurs take risk. So if you can identify just 10 businesses that are willing to take the risk, that says let's create an association, let's get together and agree to do at least just 4 or 5 things simply. Let's start out with that. And once we see success in that 4 or 5 things, I guarantee you that those 10 businesses will turn into 20. Those 20 businesses would then do some more work, get some stronger outcomes, and that 20 will turn into 50. That 50 will turn into 100. And then you have a very strong organization that's undeniable. But we need the talented 10th to get together first. Agree on something simple. Prove that we can work together and get an outcome. And let's make sure the world knows about what that outcome is so we can invite the world to play with those 10 people.
My last and final question is when are you coming to Rochester to start a chamber here?
Yep.
And I would definitely like to be involved, but seriously, would you consider coming here to Rochester and developing a chamber? Now, I believe we do have some minority business organizations here, but having a chamber doesn't hurt either, and I think this just adds on to the voice.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I have to say this, I have not talked to any of the minority business organizations here, so I can't talk freely about, you know, pros or cons. But I have listened to you, and it's because I've been an entrepreneur since 1986. I hear the things that you're saying. I know what you're saying is correct. And this is what we need here. We need this voice here. We need good leadership. We need to be able to have people here that can come here and show us and give us the guidance of helping us become a better community, because I strongly believe that we've hit some rough road, we've hit some rough pockets here. Okay, we've gone through some very difficult times. But I like to believe in the resiliency of the people here. We've got some great people here in this town. I mean, we've overcome some tremendous adversity. And I like to believe that we, as good people, as great Rochesterians, I think that we are destined to do great things. I just think we've kind of got off the track. And I think that we need now is some good leadership to help us get back on track again.
Yeah. First of all, I'm born and raised in Rochester, so anything that Rochester needs, I'm going to offer it.
Very good.
I've been asked to work with several individuals over the last year to start a chamber in Rochester, and I'm happy to do so. You know, we'll bring whatever model we have, whatever structure we have, whatever approaches we have to Rochester and give it to Rochester. There is room for a chamber. Our chamber is not the only minority business association that exists. I believe here you have a TNT group. I think you got the Black Business Association or something like that. Each one of them plays an important role. One of them, I believe, might be more about the networking and matchmaking and business connection side, and some of them could be doing some classes. The chamber can be that economic development advocacy effort that makes sure that the private sector and the public sector create a climate that's favorable for all these members, right? And so that's what we have to get used to first.
Exactly.
What we have to get used to first is that the pond is big enough for all of us.
Exactly.
And we have to have an opportunity to have a truth that says, well, look, what is each one of us willing to contribute? And so let's not be threatened by the idea of a chamber. Let's embrace it. But let's understand, hey, let's inventory what are we already doing in Rochester that might be able to be enhanced. And then let's under that business association, or the Rochester African American Chamber of Commerce, then begin to start to say, well, look, how do we become an economic development partner to everything that's going on, such that we fuel value to everything else that's happening in terms of these other associations. So I don't think it's an either or. I think it's an and we must. And you know, I'd be happy to work with anybody on that. And I think that let's not, you know, recreate the wheel. Let's look at what people have been doing for a number of years that have been effective. Let's create some new things to take everything to the next level. But at the end of the day, what we can't have is individuals then shooting each other down.
Exactly.
That would be the detriment. And one of your last questions you had talked about before, how do you get people, you know, how do we get people to not shoot each other down around on the business front? And my simple answer is the fact that I spend 90%, even as a Black chamber, I spend 90% of my time making African Americans feel comfortable about progress.
Yeah.
And that's because of the fact that, because there's no new ideas under the sun, once people begin to see progress and they say, hey, that's my idea, but they're doing it, right? And what ends up happening is that we try to then stump the progress that somebody else is having because I'm not part of it or I didn't get it done. And we have to be honest with ourselves as a community about that. And so what we need to do is just agree on what needs to be done. Create opportunities for people to play and contribute where they can play. Sometimes they need to be the driver, sometimes they need to be a passenger. But once this effort starts, we can't have everybody else shooting at it.
Exactly.
And so what we need to do is coordinate and make sure we all agree and make sure we can stay in our lanes.
Is there a phone number where we can contact you at?
Yeah. Again, the long name of my chamber is the Greater Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky African American Chamber of Commerce, or you can just Google Cincinnati African American Chamber, will pop up. My office number is area code 513-600-0068. No, excuse me. My office number is 513-751-9900. My website, if you want to check out what we're doing, is www.african-americanchamber.com.
Very good.
So that's www.african-americanchamber.com. If you want to send me emails or talk to our staff or see what our programming is, you're more than welcome to visit us there, and I'll be as responsive as I can.
I definitely appreciate you coming in and speaking with us today.
Thank you.
I thank you so very much. My name is James Young. I look forward to seeing you next week. Be blessed, and remember, it's a new day.